right. Well, welcome guys to my presentation. I hope you don't see my notifications. But today I'm going to be presenting on an introduction to UI design patterns. And here is a brief outline. First, I'm going to be talking about applying cognitive psychology to UI design and the different applicable aspects of cognitive psychology that I'm going to be talking about are these three categories. First being learning and attention and perception. And then I'm going to talk about design patterns. So this branches out into two different types of design patterns. The first is persuasive design patterns, and finally UI design patterns, which we are currently using in our app. So let me introduce myself. My name is Yerim Lee. I am from South Korea. I was born there and I moved here quite early actually, so this is still my home. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2020 as a visual communication design major, and I minored in computing and digital technologies. Just a fun fact about me, I've backpacked 10 countries in Asia, and Greece was kind of like included on the side, but I love traveling and I think that's like my favorite hobby. So I wanted to share that. And jumping right in. Applying cognitive psychology to UI design. I wanted to start with the basics. So what is UI design and HCI? So according to one source that I researched, user interface design is a subdivision of interactive design, and its main purpose is the demystification of complicated computer systems for human use. So in other words, it's just trying to simplify computer systems for common everyday users like all of us. And human computer interaction, or HCI, is an interdisciplinary area of applied research and design practice. Its main concern is to understand and facilitate the creation of user interfaces. And I'm going to focus on the interdisciplinary aspect of HCI because it uses research from psychology, sociology, art, and computing in many other areas. And that is why I'm talking about cognitive psychology today a little bit. But I'm bringing up this idea that good UI design should be intuitive. So you see this analog button machine on the left, and you can tell that you're supposed to press the buttons because the buttons are physical. They're extruding out from the surface. And when you press on the buttons, you're giving weight to them and they are going to press in physically so that you know that that is the reaction that you just pressed on number 1 or number 5. But on the right, we have the modern day iPhone, which is now all touchscreen. We don't have any physical buttons except on the sides of the phone. But we still see some similarities. In the icons themselves, the shape of the icons are actually pretty similar to an analog button. And they even kind of put in a subtle gradient to kind of suggest this 3D shape of a button. And so the whole point of that is to try to be intuitive, to try to make it easier for users who have never encountered an iPhone before to be able to use their product even though they don't have, a lot of knowledge about the product. So have like a small learning curve. And this idea of intuition, I feel like we don't really know exactly what it is to be intuitive. Like when we say something is intuitive, like we don't really explain, oh, it's intuitive because of this. But that's why we have this whole field of cognitive psychology that I'm going to talk about. And there are 4 main paths of cognitive psychology that are used to have these findings. And the first is experimental cognitive psychology, which is basically an everyday sense of how users understand the external world. And then we have computer modeling, which is an exploration of mimicking the way the human brain works in computer software. and cognitive neuroscience, which tries to understand how the brain works through a neurological point of view. And then cognitive neuropsychology, which explores abnormal or injured human brains to see what kind of effects they produce. Yeah, that one kind of sounds scary, but it's one of the four. So using these different paths of investigation, we came up with these cognitive psychology applicable findings. So these are the applicable findings for different designs or design patterns that I'm going to talk about later. And the applicable findings of cognitive psychology can be grouped into three little buckets, and I made them learning, attention, and perception just according to the source I had. That's how they like to group things. And I like to add human error there at the bottom just because I feel like a lot of design patterns and design like UI actually comes from human error. So like the undo button, for example, we probably have that because humans make mistakes all the time and we want to undo an error when we make one. But I'm just going to focus on the three there at the top. And the first is learning. So the first finding I'm going to talk about is transference. It's pretty simple. I'm using the example that I already mentioned. So we're using something that we already know, the way we use something that we already know and applying it to something new. So when we are encountering this new product, we are transferring what we know about something else onto it. Actually, even unconsciously, that's what we're trying to do, to make sense of it. And then multitasking. This is, I bet a lot of people know, we are not very good at multitasking. And it's a known fact that we don't actually do two things at once. Humans like do things either in a very fast sequential order or in a slow sequential order, like if you're not very good at doing that. Short-term memory. Humans, for the most part, just don't have a good memory, and a lot of design features have come out of this problem. And humans are slow to adapt, and this is to the point where people are actually resisting change. They don't like change, which is something to consider when we are designing, because whenever we are trying to insert like a new design or like a new feature, sometimes people don't react to that well. We want to ease people into it or give them a good incentive for the change, because here the findings show that change is not likable. The next bucket is attention. So simple, people like to go left to right. When they are looking at a screen, they usually go from left to right. When we are reading, we go from left to right. I think that's the biggest reason why people, modern day people, read from left to right. On the left, there's an example of Korean writing that is actually going from top to down and right to left. So that's going to take a while for you to get used to. You're probably going to read at a much slower pace because you're always used to reading from left to right, and that applies to other things as well, not just reading. Symbolic color. So there are certain colors that mean things universally. Red means stop and green means go. There are traffic lights in not just the United States. So the use of that is applied in design. Simon effect. So the image on the left is an example that's not really a design example. A design example would be if you're pressing a button on the lower right corner of the screen, then you kind of like, unless it's like the entire screen is changing, like you're going from one page to the next, you expect a change to happen in the area of where you've just pressed or in the area where you have acted. So wherever the action is occurring, you expect the reaction to also occur. So kind of like that, in the picture on the left, the person is using their right hand and reaching for the right side of the cup. And this is much more intuitive than the person using their right hand to reach for the left side of the cup. Here, they labeled it as compatible and incompatible, but you get the picture. And people are automatically processing everywhere they go. They're wired. So on the left, you read the sign that says, don't read this, but you don't understand that you should not read this until you've already automatically processed the sign. Like, you've already read it. So that is also, it can be used for worse or for the better. This third bucket is perception. And the first thing I'm going to mention are Gestalt principles, which are principles of perception that are created by German and Austrian psychologists. And these are the 6 principles. The first is good figure. Objects grouped together tend to be perceived as a single figure. So you see the circles are grouped together in a certain way that makes them look like a diamond. So we humans have a tendency to simplify. Similarity. Objects tend to be grouped together if they are similar. So we see the line of triangles and we see it as a line versus just like 4 triangles. And we can even see it as a division between things. So we see it as a division between the line of circles at the top and the 2 lines of circles at the bottom. Closure, visual connection or continuity between sets of elements, which do not actually touch each other. So there actually isn't a square, but we kind of see a square. And therefore we are kind of grouping the 4 circles together as one object. And proximity. Objects tend to be grouped together if they're close to one another. That's simple enough. Continuation. When there is an intersection between 2 or more objects, people tend to perceive each object as a single uninterrupted object. So you can perceive this as either 2 lines, or an X, but people are going to perceive it as an X. Symmetry. The object tend to be perceived as symmetrical shapes that form around their center. That's easy enough to understand as well. And context affects perception. There's a little funny comic on the left where you see the guy on the island yelling boat and the guy on the boat yelling land. So that's a funny way to interpret that. But yeah, this also applies to optical illusions. When like the same circle is surrounded by bigger circles, it appears smaller. And it also affects, the size is visually affected by the distance the circles surrounding it are from the circle in the center, things like that. Assumption. Yeah, humans are easy to assume. And I kind of have this like a negative comment on humans, but a lot of design practices are actually, I feel like, built off of that. The graph on the left shows, the top one shows that we judge our past experiences almost entirely on how they were at their peak and how they ended. So net pleasantness or unpleasantness or the length of the experience is almost entirely disregarded. I see this as kind of humans not wanting to calculate all these different factors to like calculate the net pleasantness of something. We just want to be simple with things, want to think about a certain moment in time and then use it to kind of assume an entire experience. So I talked about the different cognitive psychology applications, and now we're going to talk about design patterns. So the design patterns that are built off of like millions of designers just constantly like using cognitive psychology and HCI and just like all constantly researching and coming up with design practices that work and are continuously repeated. So these are recurring solutions that solve common design problems. And like I said in the beginning, there are 2 different types. There are persuasive techniques that are directly related to psychological theories, and there are visual solutions that solve problems in regards to a user's learning, attention, and perception. So the first one, persuasive design patterns. I think Kakoa touched on some of these in his PowerPoint. but I came up with kind of like a quiz so we can be a little interactive here. So this one says, these are all based off of the different design patterns. This one says, we have a tendency to pay more attention and give more weight to blank than other experiences, A, positive, or B, negative. So maybe we can use the little voting tool. If you click on participants, you can vote yes or no. Let's say vote yes for A and vote B for no. And I just want to see how many people get this right. Oh, wow. Okay, it looks like the majority of people said B. Let's see if you're right. Ugh, you guys are too smart. Yeah, negativity bias says that we have a tendency to pay more attention to negative experiences than other experiences. All right, I just have two more for this. When given two options, one default and two of other prices, users will tend to A, choose the default, B, compare the costs and benefits. Ooh. Oh, it looks like somebody changed their mind, but okay, Vinny. Let's see. So users will tend to choose the default, and that is the status quo bias. Like I said, people are kind of lazy. They just you think that they want to compare the costs and benefits, but a lot of the times they don't, which is a surprise. When sequentially shown 5 options, users will tend to remember blank the most. So A, the first and last options, or B, the third or middle option. Oh, wait, I think somebody, ooh, okay. Man, thank you. I'm glad someone got it wrong. Yeah, the first and last options will be remembered the most. It's called the serial positioning effect. And this is why I like to go first or last, like when the people call on presentations, like in classes. I just kind of like to go first if there are like 3 presentations in one class, just so I feel like the professor will remember me. But those were all persuasive design patterns. These are user interface design patterns. So these are more like functional and visual design patterns that we are actually using in our app. So the highlighted ones are the ones that we're actively using in the app. And you can see that a lot of the ones that we're using are content-based. So cards, tagging, categorization, continuous scrolling, thumbnail. These are different content design patterns that we are using in the app. And I see a lot of social interaction design patterns as well in the activity stream, which is basically the feed. Reactions, follow when you're following a group, and some forms as well. Morphing controls, you guys might not know what that is, but it's basically when you're just like pressing, like following versus do you want to follow? So like there's a button that says follow. When you press it and you're following them, the color changes, like the visually the button changes. So that is just morphing controls. But I see that we're using a couple of these form design patterns as well. But here we can also see that there's room for a lot of other opportunities. And with that in mind, I have another little interactive thing. So how many UI design patterns can you find in this little screenshot here? I screenshotted this from Expedia, actually. But if you guys could.
So, like, is like the boxes, like being able to like check the boxes and like add a flight, add a car, like all that stuff, is that like a design pattern?
Yes, it would be a filter.
Okay.
So that's one of them. Yeah, you're right. There's more than one.
Would there be 3? Because there's like the search, then there's like the check boxes, and then there's like the different toggles on the top.
Okay.
So those are like.
So the things on the top.
Different...
Yes, I said categorization. I've named it as categorization. The ones at the top. But I didn't do the search one because like I just thought it's kind of like obvious that we're searching, but I actually found 5, so there are a couple more. So it might be obvious to you, but you probably don't know that there's a name for it. So. Does anyone know? If not, I'll give you guys the answer.
Is the search button like a type of like having a button to like hit, like it's like a yellow button?
But that one was not one that I actually put.
Okay.
So other than that, there are actually more. I would say, here, I'll give one of them. Like, just even saying destination, hotel name, airport, train station, landmark, or address, this is an input prompt. So you're prompting them to put in like any one of these options into the text field. So that would actually be a design pattern.
Would there be a default option with 2 adults in 1 room?
Yeah, that would be a default option. So that's another one. The last one that I found is kind of not as visual right now, but I think it would take 1 click to get to it.
Calendar?
Yeah, it's actually the calendar picker. So it's not as obvious right now, but when you, like any one of these, when you click on the calendar, you usually get a pop out that is of a calendar and you can pick the dates on the calendar. And that would be a calendar picker. So that is, what is it? Input prompt, categorization, defaults. It's really hard to have good defaults, but that's why I just called it defaults. Calendar picker and filters. Those are the ones that I found. And search, I think it would be a category of, yeah, it would kind of be like a category, a filter. But yeah, those are the ones that I found. And just wanted to end it by saying that we could apply these UI design patterns to the app and just have an invitation for discussion on different ways that we could apply the different design patterns and either persuasive or UI to the app in a more effective
Oh, Yerim, did we just lose your screen?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. All right, cool. That's awesome. Could you go back to the list of design patterns?
This one?
Yeah. Cool. Dude, CAPTCHA is a design pattern?
Yeah, I actually did a whole presentation on CAPTCHA once.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Do enlighten us. What's it about?
Oh, wait. You know what it is though, right? Or
Yeah, but like, I guess I just don't know anything about it. I just know that I don't like
well,
it.
it was basically it was a sad conversation because basically like the initial CAPTCHA was just like distortion of words. I don't know if you remember those from the past.
Oh yeah, that still happens. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. Like it would be distorted or it would be from like ancient text. Like they would take photographs from like old tattered like books and then like you would have to read it. But yeah,
Wow.
computers just kept getting smarter. So we just kept having to find different ways of doing CAPTCHA. And that's why we have that like button now. You know that button that you check, oh, I'm human or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that actually records your screen. And like they analyze your behavior on that page to determine if you're human or not
Whoa.
until you like check that button, which is so strange to me. But yeah, I think
I never knew that.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
think even that
crazy.
will be imitated by computers though soon. And then we have that like pictures thing, you know, the select the traffic lights or select the cars or whatever.
Yeah, I know that
That's
one.
another
I hate
one.
that one.
So
Super.
I feel like honestly, another problem with that is that humans are actually capable of making a lot of mistakes. Is people are not as visually talented as
Yeah. Cool. I'm just like looking at the other ones.
I'm trying to think of
Oh, the
ways we
path.
can use like. Go on, Kendall.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just reading stuff.
I was trying to think of ways we could use like Rule Builder or like the in-place editor for like building posts, or something like that on our app.
the rule builder or in-place editor.
Yeah, just like having like rule, like how we can make it easy, I guess, for users to like build nice posts. Because like we don't want too many options. So I know like PowerPoint, like they have like, you know, the design ideas on Office 365 that like help a lot with like designing like a nice slide. Because like I don't really know how to design a nice slide, but like those ideas help me a lot.
So you're kind of saying, kind of like how like Facebook has like birthday cards or now, where you just like write your birthday comment on a birthday card instead of like writing, or I don't know, because I feel like for most postable like social media feeds now, it's kind of simple, right? It's usually just like text and then an image. So
Yeah, I guess so. It's usually pretty simple now, I guess.
like I don't know how complicated we would like I don't know if you would be wanting to add like actual design elements like
Yeah.
color, like I don't know, like do you mean like background
Yeah, I guess I was
colors
just
or
trying to think of.
something?
I guess just like ways where they can add multiple images, like how Rayon was saying with the different sections, like adding text section and adding like an image section after that. But just basically having a way where the user can discover this, type of ways to make posts.
Kind of like having like a text box already there or something like that.
Yeah,
like
maybe.